It was the 23rd of December 2009, the day before Christmas Eve. Children across the world were waking up to count down the number of sleeps left until the big day. But in one house in Salisbury, Wicomico County, Maryland, United States, their day started off with a sinking feeling of fear and dread. 11-year-old Sarah Haley Foxwell was missing. The question is, who took Sarah Haley Foxwell away? Where is she? Is she safe? Sarah Foxwell, born on May 18, 1998 in Salisbury, Maryland,
grew up in a large family with 2 sisters and 4 brothers.
Her mother also had 3 children from a previous marriage. When Sarah's parents divorced, her mother faced tough challenges having to care for all the children alone. She had to work hard, often leaving the kids to stay with relatives. Sarah, the middle child, always strove to maintain peace among her siblings when they argued and fought. Every passing hour brought new obstacles and difficulties to overcome. In December 2009, when Sarah was 11, she temporarily moved in with her aunt and grandparents. Christmas was approaching, and her mother had to work all day to buy gifts for each child. Sarah's aunt lived in a large farmhouse on the outskirts of Salisbury. This house had become the favorite place of the children because of its vast space to play. On December 22nd, with only 3 days left until Christmas, the atmosphere in the house was filled with excitement. The children happily ran around the house, but no one thought that their joy would abruptly and horrifyingly end. Everything seemed normal until evening. Sarah's aunt ordered pizza for dinner, and around 9 p.m., everyone began to prepare for bed. Sarah and her younger sister, Emma. The bedroom was at the end of a hall beside the back door. The temperature had dipped below freezing when they went to bed, so they knew they would have a beautiful white Christmas that year. Early the next morning, the 23rd of December, Jennifer received a call around 7 a.m. Jennifer was Sarah's mother and had been working overtime so that she could buy the children gifts for Christmas. Jennifer wasn't expecting to hear from Amy so early, but Amy's call made her immediately concerned. Amy could not find Sarah. She had checked the barn, inside and outside, but there was no sign of her. Sarah's aunt, filled with fear and panic, immediately thought that Sarah might have gone outside to play in the snow that had fallen overnight. But when she realized that Sarah's shoes and coat were still at home, she understood that something was wrong. When she noticed that Sarah's toothbrush was missing from its usual place in the bathroom, her anxiety deepened. A mysterious and eerie feeling engulfed the entire house, forcing the family to confront an unforeseen truth. The officers arrived within minutes and immediately began searching the house. Wicomico County Sheriff Mike Lewis and Sergeant David Owens and the entire sheriff's department went to Amy's house. There was something that disturbed them about the case. Even though the only item missing was her green toothbrush, nobody believed Sarah just left on her own in the middle of the night. Sarah's aunt informed them that she always checked all the doors and windows every night before bed, and she had done so the previous evening as well. The police couldn't find Sarah anywhere inside the house or nearby. Upon learning about the missing toothbrush, the officers began to consider the possibility of an abduction. Perhaps the kidnapper grabbed this item before leaving the house with Sarah, so they decided to check if all the doors and windows were indeed locked. As they approached the back door next to Sarah's room and tried the handle, it opened right away. Sarah's aunt swore the door was locked the night before and hadn't been opened since. However, she remembered they kept a spare key outside near the entrance. She went there and checked it, but the key wasn't there. The fact that the perpetrator knew about this spare key suggested that they knew the family quite well. Another unsettling detail was that their dog hadn't made a sound that night, despite usually barking at strangers. Fearing that Sarah might have been kidnapped, investigators immediately initiated a large-scale search. A statewide Amber Alert was issued. The pressing question remains, where is Sarah now, and is she safe? As each hour passes without any sign of her, anxiety and fear grip everyone's hearts tighter. Sarah's mother, her aunt, her siblings, and even the neighbors are overcome with worry and despair. Thoughts race through their minds, imagining the worst-case scenarios and praying for Sarah's swift return. The community rallies together with volunteers joining the search efforts and spreading awareness far and wide. Flyers are distributed, social media posts shared, and every possible avenue explored to bring Sarah home. Yet, despite their tireless efforts, uncertainty hangs heavily in the air, casting a shadow over the once joyful anticipation of the approaching holiday season. Each passing moment feels like an eternity, filled with anguish and apprehension. The absence of answers only deepens the sense of helplessness and anguish among those who love Sarah. They cling to hope, desperately longing for news of her whereabouts and well-being, praying for a miracle to reunite them with their beloved Sarah. News of her disappearance spread rapidly, and many local residents contacted the police offering their help. The sheriff appealed to the public through the media, asking them to check their properties for anything suspicious. Dozens of local officers were called for the search, and they also received help from neighboring towns' departments and even other states. They all hoped to find Sarah alive. Given that the perpetrator had taken her toothbrush, it might indicate his plans to keep her alive, so the police devoted all their resources to the search. Outside the house, they found their first lead. There were relatively fresh tire tracks in the snow, indicating that the abductor likely arrived by car. Since all of Sarah's warm clothing was left behind, it was clear that the perpetrator couldn't have taken her on foot. Meanwhile, Sarah's relatives were brought to the police station, where something unexpected happened. Emma, Sarah's cousin who had slept in the same room with her, tugged at her grandmother's sleeve and whispered that she had a secret. She claimed to have seen the person who took Sarah. What had happened? Emma looked around the dimly lit room, only seeing shadows of familiar objects. Suddenly, a faint yet distinct sound of voices drew her out of her daze. Standing by the bed, Emma heard a stranger talking to Sarah. She couldn't make out what was happening, but she felt a strange sensation creeping through her small body. Amidst the confusion, Emma chose to pretend to be asleep, but her mind couldn't stop thinking about what she had heard. She witnessed a blurry image of the man, trying to remember his face and voice. Who was he? And why was he here, in their room, in the middle of the night? As the man left the room, Emma remained in her position, showing no signs of being awake. But as the moonlight illuminated through the window, she caught a glimpse of his silhouette, and a sense of horror enveloped her entire body. That's Mr. Tommy, someone she knows very well, someone everyone in the family knows. His real name is Thomas J. Leggs Jr., 31 years old. He knew the family as he had dated Amy, but he had not been in touch for over a month. Their relationship had ended. Amy confirmed that Thomas knew where the spare key in the garden was, and he knew which bedroom belonged to Sarah. When they had dated, Thomas was at the house frequently and spent time with the children. Police knew exactly who Thomas was. He was a registered sex offender in both Maryland and Delaware. He had spent time in prison for the molestation of a 12-year-old girl in Salisbury and been arrested for assaults on 2 children at a local mall and a 16-year-old at Delaware's Rehoboth Beach boardwalk. At the time of Sarah's disappearance, he was out on bond. He was arrested and accused of assaulting a 24-year-old woman just a few months before Sarah was taken. The woman in that case told police he broke into her house at 4 a.m. and was standing over her bed undressing himself. Thomas lived just a few miles from Amy's house. He lived in a shed on his parents' property. Police found him and brought him to the station for questioning. They were aware that he had molested and sexually assaulted young girls in the past, but to their knowledge, he had never killed anyone before, so their main focus was to find Sarah and to find her alive. They went to search the man's living area just a few miles away in a warehouse on his parents' property. Investigators took him in for questioning and also obtained a search warrant for the warehouse. Inside, there was a mess and deplorable living conditions, but no evidence related to Sarah's disappearance was found. However, the police discovered a large collection of adult magazines and DVDs inside, filling up the warehouse. During questioning, Thomas consistently denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. The atmosphere was tense as the investigators sifted through the clutter in the shed, hoping to find any trace that could lead them to Sarah. As Thomas vehemently denied any wrongdoing, the desperation among the investigators and Sarah's relatives grew. They couldn't comprehend how someone could act so callously in the face of a young girl's disappearance. The shed, once an ordinary structure on the outskirts of town, now became a symbol of fear and suspicion. Despite their best efforts, the search yielded no answers, leaving everyone feeling defeated and powerless. The realization that Sarah might still be somewhere, in the hands of her abductor, weighed heavily on their hearts. And as they left the shed, the sense of urgency to find Sarah only intensified, driving them to pursue every lead, no matter how small. He asserted that he was trying to address his issues, referring to his pattern of offending against underage 18 girls. According to Thomas, during his relationship with Sarah's aunt, he deliberately avoided being alone with children so that no one could falsely accuse him of any improper behavior. When informed that Emma had seen him on the night of the abduction, Thomas dismissed it, claiming that the girl often fabricated stories and that he wasn't there. The police didn't believe a word he said, not just because of Thomas's prior crimes. While discussing Sarah's disappearance, he repeatedly smirked and mocked the police, even though Thomas considered his crime flawless and believed the police wouldn't be able to prove his guilt. Police told Thomas to give himself up and tell them where Sarah was as Emma saw him in the bedroom so they could place him at Amy's house that night. He denied being in the house that night. He said that he was at a bar in Salisbury until 1 a.m. After that, he drove straight home. Nobody could verify where he was between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. He claimed he was at home, so police checked his phone records. That night, he sent text messages to multiple women and tried to meet up with them. They all declined. In the early hours of the morning when Sarah disappeared, his phone pinged off of 3 different cell phone towers. The cell tower data placed him in a specific area. It allowed police to focus on that area only off Melson Road, east of Rumridge Road in Delmar. Despite all of this, detectives still couldn't crack Thomas. They hoped that the girl was still alive, so they poured all their efforts into finding her. Thomas could have used the candy to lure her into his car car. The tire tracks also matched with the tracks left in the snow in front of the house on the night of Sarah's disappearance. The man himself told detectives that he hadn't been to that house in over a month, and now they had proof that he had lied. Despite the fact that Thomas continued to deny everything, the police still hoped to find Sarah. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers continued searching the area, scouring the territory for many miles around her house. In the context of thick falling snow and biting cold winds, the search became extremely difficult and exhausting. The thick snow covered everything, making movement difficult. Search teams faced the risk of slipping and getting lost in the dark and continuously falling snow. In the freezing cold and darkness of the night, those involved in the search felt a sense of helplessness and despair permeate the air. The sound of the howling wind along with the footsteps on the snow were the only echoes in the cold space. Every passing second felt like a heavy burden, as they didn't know if they would find Sarah or not. However, they kept trying, relentlessly hoping for a positive outcome to the search, despite the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Early the next morning, they ventured out again to continue the search for the little girl. Throughout this time, the stream of volunteers not only didn't dwindle but grew even larger. In total, 3,000 people joined the search efforts. Remarkably, among these volunteers were not only adults but also their children. They distributed water, hot tea, and food, everyone giving their utmost effort in the hope that eventually it would help them find Sarah alive. Despite the setback, the unwavering commitment and solidarity of the community shone brightly. Their collective resolve to find Sarah remained unshakable, and their unity strengthened as they faced the daunting task together. The sheer number of volunteers, including children, exemplified the deep-rooted compassion and determination within the community. With each passing moment, their unified efforts served as a testament to the power of solidarity and the unwavering hope that Sarah would be found safe and sound. Meanwhile, investigators gathered additional evidence linking Thomas to the abduction. As soon as the man was brought to the police station, he was provided with a fresh set of clothes, and his garments were sent to the laboratory for examination. Experts discovered foreign DNA on the suspect's underwear and compared it to a sample taken from Sarah's personal belongings. The results were a complete match. Considering the DNA found on his underwear, investigators arrived at a grim conclusion. Each discovery, while initially bringing hope, seemed to later transition into disappointment. Fortunately, there was no false smile to deceive the little girl. It appears that after the abduction, Thomas sexually assaulted the girl. The second day of the search also yielded no results, and on the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, thousands of people once again went to search for Sarah despite it being a holiday. None of them felt like giving up. On that day, investigators received GPS data from Thomas's phone. Unfortunately, there were no specific locations, just information about his phone connecting to specific cell towers. The police discovered that on the night Sarah disappeared, his phone had connected to 3 towers, allowing them to determine the approximate triangular area where he must have been. Investigators focused all their efforts in this area located near the state border, about 8 miles from Sarah's aunt's house. On Christmas Day, the city of Salisbury saw the best and worst of humanity. That day, despite it being Christmas Day, thousands of volunteers from the community helped police search for Sarah. The Wicomico deputy assisted in some way, and K-9 police units, as well as tracking experts from across the state, participated on the ground. Police from neighboring communities rode horses and ATVs, combing through forests, fields, and roadside ditches for any signs of Sarah. Helicopters also searched the area from the air. Despite the searches, the prayers, the wishes, and hope, there was no Christmas miracle that year. At around 4 p.m., Sarah's body was found in Lily Lane in a wooded area of Wicomico County near the Maryland-Delaware line. It is a small side road about 60 feet into the woods. Sarah had been murdered. She was on her back, and her arms were stretched towards the sky with her fists clenched. Initially, they confirmed that the victim had been sexually assaulted. They found signs of strangulation, but determined that the perpetrator had not succeeded in killing her that way. In Sarah's lungs, experts discovered dirt, leading them to believe that the killer had tried to drown her in a puddle of water. During this torture, the victim lost consciousness afterward. Sarah's death was ruled as a homicide. Thomas was charged with her murder. The case against Thomas was strong. Emma saw him in the bedroom that night and later picked him out of a lineup. Sarah's toothbrush was found in his gold 2003 Dodge Ram 1500 pickup truck. Sarah's hair and fibers from the Christmas-themed pajama bottoms she had worn to bed were found on the passenger side of his truck. The tire marks in the snow near Amy's house from that night matched his truck, and DNA from his underwear matched Sarah's DNA. Police believed that Thomas kidnapped Sarah from her bedroom in the middle of the night and sexually assaulted her. The autopsy revealed she had multiple injuries to her body. A number of the injuries, such as asphyxia, smoke inhalation, hypothermia, and burns, contributed to her death. Police believed that after Thomas sexually assaulted Sarah, He did everything in his power to hide his crime. He knew that Sarah would be able to identify him. Police believed he tried to smother her and drown her in the mud water. Some of that debris was found in her lungs. He then left the woods and returned with gasoline and attempted to burn Sarah's body. When he did this, Sarah was still alive, and that is evident from the autopsy findings of smoke inhalation being a factor in her death. This virtually eliminated any possibility for him to escape punishment. The wait for the trial lasted more than a year but never began. In early 2011, the defense decided to offer Thomas a deal under the condition that he would confess his guilt and receive a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Considering what he did to Sarah, this deal seems unfair, but there are some serious reasons supporting such a decision. One main reason is that Sarah's sister will have to testify many times in court, opposite of the killer. The kidnapping and death of her sister became a serious challenge for her, and the trial may have affected her further. Another reason for proposing a deal is that the defense cannot be 100% certain that they will get the death penalty. If Thomas's lawyers reach a different verdict, he may have the opportunity to be released someday, which is not part of the terms of the agreement under any circumstances. For another matter, the state governor opposed the death penalty at the time, reducing the possibility of the death penalty. Finally, Thomas agreed and told the detectives everything they knew. He admitted that he deceived Sarah into leaving the house with him, then took her away and sexually assaulted and then killed her. He received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole and was transferred to a maximum prison. During the first days, another prisoner attacked him during the afternoon with a homemade weapon, causing several serious cuts. Thomas survived, and prison staff implemented additional safeguards to protect him from other inmates who wanted to harm him. Sarah's case sparked outrage because the system continually enabled Thomas to be released and continue to commit crimes. Due to the severity and savagery of the crime, the state of Maryland wanted to seek the death penalty. Thomas agreed to a plea deal instead. He received 2 life sentences without parole for the first-degree murder and the first-degree sexual offenses of Sarah. He was also given 30 years for kidnapping and 20 years for burglary. The plea deal meant that Emma would not have to testify at trial. Thomas should never have had the opportunity to even know Sarah, let alone be in her life. He was not safe around children. Regardless of what he may have told others and how he may have portrayed himself, his criminal convictions revealed his true identity, and he should never have been near children. His sentences in the past were not good enough either. This was a man who committed serious crimes yet was released early, and even when he continued to commit crimes in the state, he was released on bond, which afforded him not only more time to rape again, but this time to escalate his crimes and murder a child.